This is Tech Talk Detroit with Brian Spurgeon and Chuck Lobert. Tech Talk Detroit brings you the latest in tech news and Detroit happenings every week.
Welcome back to Tech Talk Detroit. Happy to have you with us again this week. Brian, how you doing?
Doing good as always. Just another beautiful week here of actually we got some rain and stuff going, so just getting a lot of stuff done around the house and taking a little bit of R&R. So no complaints here. What's good with you, Chuck?
Oh, not a lot going on. Like you said, getting some rain this week, so that kind of stinks. But I dropped my bike off at my friend's house to have it worked on while we're waiting on rain. Well, we've got the rain, so can't ride anyways. But did a bit of riding last week. It was really nice to get back out there and get into it again. So that was kind of fun. And then finished up the basement finally. So that was cool. Good to see. Have a nice workout area down there and everything. So on rainy days, I still have some stuff to do to try to keep in shape, or get in shape. I shouldn't say keep in shape, but to try to get into shape.
Yeah, I was gonna say, now that it's built, the easy part's done. Now it's the hard part. You gotta actually use the stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, but looking forward to the rain going away, and hopefully have we don't, in Michigan here, we don't get too many months of nice weather, so we've only got a couple left here. So hoping to be able to take advantage of it and still spend some time outside before I have to work out in the basement. But we thought this week we would talk about ransomware. It's one of the biggest security topics out there, one of the biggest threats out there. And so we thought we would take a little bit of time today and kind of talk about how prevalent it is, talk about what it looks like, and what you can be doing to protect yourself. And then ultimately, with ransomware, when we talk about what ransomware is, it's a type of malware, a type of virus that encrypts your data, certain amounts of data, whatever it is, whatever it can get access to, and won't give you access to it until you quote unquote pay the ransom, right? So should you ever have to pay that ransom is the other big question. I think what I heard, the latest statistic I heard was that ransomware costs businesses more than $75 billion with a B, $75 billion per year. So what that means is that a lot of companies do pay, but should you pay? Should you have to pay? So I think that's really what we wanted to touch on today. Kind of go through some of the statistics around ransomware, but really what should you be doing to make sure that you're protected and that you don't ever find yourself in that situation where you do have to pay.
Yeah, I think it's one of the topics, just talking with our clients, it's always one of the front and center concerns everybody has. I think obviously, it's always getting a ton of media exposure, as at the end of the day, you just see large companies that are susceptible to it. So I think it's one of those threats where, it's kind of in your face all the time. And you, even as a small business, you have to think now, like, you're at a legitimate risk. And the case is, everybody is. It's not a matter of, how much money your business is bringing in. I know a lot of people kind of have the mentality of, they're going to go after the big players, and it's not true. If you look at it, the ransom amount that they typically go for is, is 5,000 is probably, I think is a number I see frequently, because they want an amount that's attainable for most businesses to pay. Their goal is to try to cash in on as many as they can. So from that standpoint, I think it is very much a concern that everybody has and shares equally. But in terms of what it does, you hit it exact. They're going to encrypt your network. You're going to lose access to all your files, and it really just leaves you with a big decision to make of, do I pay the ransom? And if I don't, what is my other options and alternatives? So I think, that's kind of a route we can get into, is, how to go about protecting yourself from it, and what are the safe measures you should have in place for in the event if you do get hit with a ransomware, so that you know what you have to do to recover.
Absolutely. So, why don't we start with some statistics, if I can speak here. Just some that I was able to find online. It says a new organization will fall victim to ransomware every 14 seconds. They expect that to go up to every 11 seconds by 2021. 1.5 million new phishing sites are created every month. The ransomware attacks have increased over 97% over the past couple of years. And the big one that I think stood out to me, 50% of companies that were surveyed in this particular survey didn't believe that their organization was properly prepared to be able to handle a ransomware attack. So as prevalent as ransomware is, that one really kind of shocked me that, over 50% of companies just didn't even believe that they were prepared for it. So, that's really kind of what brought this up is, what does that mean to be prepared? So, from a starting point, what's the right protections to have in place? Because, we always say there's only so much that you can do. You can put all the protections in the world in place. Ultimately, stuff can still get through, but it has to start with having that right protection. So, obviously you've got your basics, your antivirus software, making sure your computer's up to date, stuff like that. But, when you go beyond the basics, because, the other thing that I found pretty staggering in these statistics was that 75% of companies that did get infected were running up to date endpoint protection, antivirus software. So, again, yeah, that's something you have to have. But going beyond that, what else should companies be doing when it comes to protecting themselves against ransomware?
Yeah, I think, there's several layers to it, and that's what I think makes it so complex in terms of fighting against it, and why frequently I think companies, generally have a sense that maybe they are still vulnerable. But ultimately, the answer is not typically easy. It's you kind of have to address your infrastructure as a whole. So I think for me, it starts with a thorough gap analysis of your entire network. So I think you need to understand everything that's on your network. I think you need to identify your critical endpoints. So, your servers that are your file servers, your application servers, things like that. You need to understand what is in fact critical on your network, and put some special attention to those. But ultimately, just from a high level, from an infrastructure standpoint, it starts with having a very good firewall. There's all different types of firewalls. I think a common thing we see a lot of times when we take on new clients is they're almost running like a consumer grade router for their business. And I think it's like the lock on your front door to your house, right? If just by neglecting your firewall and not really investing into that, it's like just closing your door and not locking it. So I think that's kind of the first step, is making sure that from a networking standpoint, right? All the intruders are coming in through the internet. You want to have a very robust firewall that has a lot of security services enabled. Those firewalls are actively monitoring all the traffic coming in and looking for things that are suspicious. So from there, you can also block different countries and such from accessing, which significantly reduces the impact you're going to get initially. Staying on the infrastructure, though, I think, like you mentioned, despite having good antivirus, you still see these. However, it's still important. I think you got to have all of your endpoints protected and managed by a central security solution. You don't want to go and just buy ad hoc antivirus licenses. You want to have a central management that's regulating policies and deploying them. So I think that's kind of where it starts. And then from there, in terms of prevention, there's a lot of different things. So, I think one of the complexities we run into today is our footprint is spread all over. It's not just in the walls that our building operates out of anymore. We're in the cloud now, and that presents a whole new layer of complexity when it comes to addressing your security, right? And it's not that it's less secure, it's another area that you need to address. So I think, there's a lot of different security services out there that are able to monitor our accounts, kind of give us an AI learning type feel to it, where it learns your habits of your email, when you access OneDrive, and it can pick out anomalies. So, I think that's kind of where you're at, is starting on that perimeter, securing the firewall, securing the cloud, and then that kind of is the baseline for your preventative. From there, and Chuck, I know you know a lot about this, but it gets back into, once you've identified those critical infrastructures, it boils down to backup. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's your number one tool in combating ransomware, is going to be your backups. And we have a good partnership with Datto, very robust backup. But even the backups now are starting to scan for the ransomware. So they're able to take an image of your servers, scan it, and tell you, hey, we see something suspicious here. You guys might be compromised. But ultimately, your backup is your tool that if all of the other preventative measures you have in place fail, your backup is what you're going to be relying upon to get back up and running.
Absolutely, and I think another point, to make is a lot of this ransomware comes through phishing emails. So that's one of the top ways that you're going to find that it's going to get in. So having protection on your email, having things set up so that forwarding rules can't be set up, having MFA set up, having spam protection set up, all of that's going to help. And then I think another big thing is training the users, so that they know when they see a particular email, how to spot if it's a phishing email or if it's a legitimate email, what to be suspicious of, give them tools that they can click on to check emails, different things like that. And, I think that is one of the biggest ways that you're going to help protect. So, I mean, obviously you've got your, like the stuff that you mentioned, your infrastructure stuff, you've got your antivirus software. It's always good to have a DNS protection software as well, something like a Cisco umbrella. But then, look at the ways that the ransomware is going to get access. And one of the biggest ways is through email. So, really making sure that your email is properly locked down, making sure that you've got the appropriate antivirus there as well, outside of just the antivirus running on the computers and the servers, and then the spam filtering. And then, the big thing is just making sure that your users understand why they should be suspicious, what they should be suspicious of, and then how to react if they do see something like that. So, I think that really goes a long way into helping to protect against that, getting that attack in the first place. But then, we've talked about all of these different protections, but nothing's 100%. So you could have every one of these in place and potentially you could still get infected, right? You could still get an attack. So, that brings up that question. Then, you're sitting there, you get a pop-up on your computer, your file shares or your SharePoint, whatever it is, just got attacked by ransomware, your data is encrypted, you can't access it, and they want you to pay, whatever, $130,000 to get your data back. What is the next step at that point? And I think it goes to what you were just talking about there, your backup, right? Mm-hmm. If you have the proper backup solution in place, that's really should be your answer to anything. You should never have to pay, because that should be kind of your final spot to go, so to speak. And that, as long as you know that it's working, you're getting regular backup reports, that it's backing up as often as you need it to back up, that you've got copies of it, and that the backup is secured. Again, something that you mentioned is your backup solution checking itself for ransomware? Because if you're backing up encrypted data, that's not going to do you a whole lot of good. But then again, that comes down to, well, how often are you backing up? If you're backing up once a day, you could have just lost an entire day's worth of work. Is that okay? The answer might be yes, or you might go, well, wait a minute, no. If I lose 2 hours worth of work, I just lost all this money and it's going to take me forever to recreate it. Well, then you're not backing up enough. You need to be backing up every hour type thing, or every 15 minutes or every 2 hours. Every organization is going to be different. There's no set solution for all organizations. That's why you have to look at everyone individually and figure out what the business needs are, and then build your backup solution to meet the business needs. But ultimately, if you have to pay for your ransom to get your data back, that means that all of your protections failed and that you didn't have the appropriate backup in place. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, we've encountered it, unfortunately, in the past, and we've never had to have a client pay the ransom. I think it's exactly that. It's, if you don't have a plan in place, you aren't prepared for that type of event. And by prepared, it's a combination of understanding your risk, training your users, like you've said, to identify the risk, and also to have a very robust backup in place. Then in that situation, it's, you haven't took the ransomware threat seriously. So I think in that situation, that's the only time I see somebody having to pay, where if you don't have a backup, you don't have a way to roll back. I think if everybody's, and all the stuff we're talking about, these are things that you should do anyways. That you shouldn't do these just because there's a ransomware threat. This is just good business practices as it relates to IT. So, if you're doing these and you're really diligent about it, yeah, ransomware suck. You can lose a day to a couple days of productivity at times. However, you should never feel like your business will be lost in the event of that if you're doing all of this other stuff properly. Yeah, but I think ultimately the backups are the key. And, before you back up, though, obviously you do have to be able to identify how this exploit happened. And, when the servers do get encrypted, typically they leave little breadcrumbs in terms of how they got to that spot. So, you can follow logs, you can track IP addresses, and typically you can narrow it down to at least where the entry point was. And like you mentioned, more often than not, it's via one of your end users and likely through a phishing scam. So I know we've hit that in the past, but ultimately, your end users are in reality, your largest risk, because they're the ones that everybody's targeting all day. And you think about how many different emails you get coming in on a typical day. I mean, I think I have on average 200 to 300 emails that hit my inbox every day. And if I was to actually go and look at my spam filter, I'm probably getting several thousand attempts to emails. And just the sheer volume that are junk mail, phishing, malicious in nature are not making its way through. So yeah, knowing that, it's very easy for one to just slip through the cracks, and they do a good job of mimicking, a business that you deal with regularly. So I think you really hit the nail on the head. The employee training is crucial. It's not just important for your IT guy to understand what ransomware looks like. They're not the ones typically that are interfacing with all the clients. So I think it's very important for the end users to be trained up, know what to look for. It's a combination of that. And then, in terms of if you do get exploited, you got to have that backup. So I think ultimately it just boils down to kind of what I hit in the beginning of, you really got to start building, what we like to call a disaster recovery plan. And I think ransomware falls under disaster recovery. Like, you essentially have to treat it as if, your entire server network got wiped out today, and we need to rebuild it back up and build it better. And I think that's kind of the approach that you're looking at. But if you take those precautions, then it's something that anybody can manage through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, because obviously I'm out there talking to prospects and clients and such, and I've heard of other outsourced IT providers, managed service providers, using in their marketing the fact that they either have, what's the word I'm looking for, that you would pay Bitcoin, that they either have Bitcoin, or I've heard them say, well, we know where to go get Bitcoin in the event of you getting attacked by ransomware. And it always kind of makes me laugh and cringe at the same time, because to me that's a horrible marketing scheme, right? If you're telling people that you have Bitcoin, what you're telling them is that you didn't protect them right in the first place, or you had all the right protections in place, but you didn't have the right backup in place. Because like we've said, that's the only time that you're ever going to have to pay, is the protections didn't work, which is possible, and ultimately an attack happened. But then what you're saying is that, well, we also didn't have a good backup in place that would meet your needs, because that would be the only reason that you'd have to pay, because you should be able to restore from the backup. So in essence, to me, what you're marketing is, we didn't properly protect our clients, so now we know how to handle it if you don't. So I always tell people, if you're talking to somebody and they tell you that, that's where the conversation should end. You should run away from that company, because they're not going to properly protect you if they have the practice of paying somebody for ransom. Like you said, I'm not going to say that we've never had a client that hasn't been attacked by ransomware. It has happened. However, we've never had a client that's lost any data because of it, or that's had to pay anything because of it, because we work very hard to make sure that the backup solutions that our clients have meet their needs. We regularly review them. We have our NOC team that's constantly watching the backups to make sure that they're working properly, testing them, all of that kind of stuff. And if you're doing that, that's the point where you should never have to worry about paying a ransom. So, that's just always something that I say is, if you're hearing that, that's, it's time to move on and just keep looking. So you won't hear that from a reputable outsourced IT provider, or any IT provider for that matter.
Yeah, there's certainly no guarantee paying. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a criminal that took over your network. So, you can't expect them to be honest and loyal to their word of unencrypting it. And honestly, I think a lot of these ransomwares are just bots that crawl the internet looking for an opportunity. They deliver the payload, and they give you wiring instructions, and there's never any type of follow-up to it. They're just out there collecting money. So, it's a dangerous game to play if you're thinking, I can buy my way out of this. I think it's something that you got to have a good IT strategy that you are very diligent about daily. And if you have a good plan in place, then in the event if you do have an exploit, you should be able to go reference that plan and be confident that your business can recover.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, that was what we wanted to cover today. We thought it was an important one because it is very prevalent out there right now. So hopefully you were able to learn something and get something out of it, and appreciate you taking the time to spend with us again this week. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.
Interact with Tech Talk Detroit at techtalkdetroit.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.